I take my job seriously. Yes, it's a lot of fun, but every time I sit down to do a review on anything, I start by reminding myself that the reason you're here is because you trust my opinion and you trust that I'll tell it like it is. I know many of you use these reviews to help you decide what vehicle to spend your hard-earned money on, so I don't take this responsibility lightly. You want the truth, and I want to give it to you. Today we're going to take a look at CFMOTO's new ZFORCE 950 Sport, and we're going to try and accomplish two things before we're done here. First, I want to answer some of the questions you've asked and address some of the points you raised on my walk-around video. And second, I want to lay bare the good and the bad about CFMOTO's new flagship model. First, let's take a look at what the ZFORCE actually is. Now, obviously, one quick glance and you know it's a sport side-by-side, but what's it made of? The chassis is all new. It houses a 963cc fuel-injected twin-cylinder engine mated to a CV transmission. A 60-inch wide set of double A-arms up front yield 11 inches of travel, and a 4-link trailing arm suspension system CFMOTO calls the Quad Link yields just under 12 inches of travel out back. Both ends are damped by a set of compression and rebound adjustable CFMOTO branded piggyback shocks. The motor produces a claimed 80 horsepower, which is obviously less than most other 60-inch sport side-by-sides. And this brings me to the first point I want to address that you guys brought up about my original walk-around video on this unit. How does CFMOTO measure horsepower? Many of you commented that you'd heard the reason this vehicle is down on horsepower compared to its competition is because CFMOTO measures engine horsepower somewhere after the secondary clutch, some claiming it's actually measured at the wheels. I called a CFMOTO engineer directly to find out the truth, and he confirmed that CFMOTO measures their engine horsepower just like every other side-by-side manufacturer does in North America, at the crank, which means the ZFORCE 900 is simply down 20 horsepower to much of its competition. Which initially seemed like a shame, so much potential let down by an underpowered engine. Then I drove it, and I can say with all confidence this engine feels like it has way more than 80 ponies. It pulls hard off the line and has no trouble spinning its wheels in the dirt or getting sideways in the corners. I suspect this is largely due to impeccable clutch tuning by the crew at CV Tech. Where you do notice the horsepower deficit is from mid-range onward. The ZFORCE 950 doesn't have the long legs of its competitors when it's wound out completely, but it's definitely not disappointing. One thing I want to point out about the 950 that struck me immediately is the drastic improvement in overall build quality compared to previous CFMOTO sport models. Everything about this unit is better. From the fit and finish of the plastics, to the quality of the welds, to the fit and feel of the switchgear, it all just feels, well, it feels excellent. CFMOTO has upped its finish quality standards big time, and they deserve to be recognized and applauded for it. When we talk about the chassis, we're talking about ride quality and handling. The specs suggest this thing should ride pretty well. It doesn't have the most travel in its class, but with a set of fully adjustable piggyback shocks, it should be capable of a plush, yet well-controlled ride. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. With all the shocks set to full soft and the springs wound out completely, the ride was harsh at best, especially in the rear. Every bump, big or small, upset the chassis and was felt all the way through the seat. The front was better, but not by a lot. After riding the ZFORCE back-to-back with its competition, it became even more clear that the ride quality needs a serious look. I think the place to start is softer spring rates, and I think the proof of this is that even with the springs all the way out, the ride height didn't change at all. Likewise, handling leaves something to be desired. I think this is closely linked to the harsh ride characteristics of the suspension. It just didn't feel settled or planted at any point. Drifting on a smooth fire road was controllable, and the power steering system is actually tuned very well. But as soon as any kind of rough surface was thrown into the mix, the chassis got quickly out of shape and didn't want to hold a straight line. I think the best way to describe it would be to say that at high speeds on rough terrains, it didn't do what I wanted it to when I wanted it, but it did do what I didn't want it to when I didn't want it. I've actually raced the old ZFORCE 1000 more than once, and if I had to choose based on handling alone, I think that I'd choose it over the 950. There's some work to be done here, and I sincerely hope CFMOTO puts in the time, because the rest of the ZFORCE 950 is actually very good. The interior, for example, is excellent. The seats are well bolstered, and even as a big guy, I find them extremely comfortable. The dash looks slick, and those switches are some of the best switchgear in the industry. The shifter is a thing of beauty. Hands down, no contest. The best shifting side-by-side transmission I've ever used. The doors, or part doors or whatever they are, while not at all useful for deflecting mud and dirt, have a very sturdy feel, operate smoothly and positively, and don't rattle. The seat adjusters are excellent, and the passenger grab handle is adjustable but locks in place, so it doesn't rattle one bit either. This gauge it's beautiful is the best way I can describe it. It's not big, but it's so bright, and the information on the screen is so crisp and easy to read, it's almost like it's a 4K display or something. It's solidly mounted on the steering column and is always right where you want it to be when you need some info. The screen auto switches into a black scheme when things get dark, and there are two completely different gauge displays for eco and sport modes. One thing I could not figure out, mostly because our press unit did not come with a manual, was what the little Bluetooth light on the gauge was for. Now, obviously I know it means Bluetooth, but no matter what I did, I could not get my phone to connect. After another call to CFMOTO, it was confirmed that the screen will display caller ID info and other information from your phone. However, I still couldn't get my Samsung phone to connect, though anyone with an iPhone appeared to have no trouble. Visually, the ZFORCE 950 has a love it or hate it kind of look. There's no question it's unique, which I think is good, and it definitely has some cool styling cues. But what I like most is that in a sea of sport side-by-sides that are all starting to look very much the same, this one looks completely different. I like how the shiny colored hood curves right over into the dashboard. I like how the rear fenders are cut at an upward angle, and I like the accent lighting on the head and taillights. I like these 27-inch Stag tires, but I do not like these Flower Power-esque 14-inch aluminum wheels that look like they'd be right at home on a VW Beetle or a Kia Soul. At first, I didn't like the Honda Pioneer 500 style rear rack, but the more I used it, the more it actually grew on me, and there's no question rearward visibility is absolutely incredible, thanks in part to the lack of an actual cargo box. You guys wanted to know my opinion on CFMOTO's new for 2021 ZFORCE 950 Sport. Now, I've tried to be fair, but also completely honest. My final thoughts on this unit relate to price and subsequently value. The ZFORCE 950's closest competitor would be Polaris's Razor Trail S 900. It too is 60 inches wide and produces just shy of 80 horsepower. In Canada, it retails for $800 less than the ZFORCE 950. However, the ZFORCE has power steering, a better gauge, fully adjustable shocks, and in Canada comes with a winch, roof, mirrors, and a 5-year limited warranty. Should you go out and buy a ZFORCE 950 Sport? That's a question only you can answer. I've done my best to give you my honest opinion so that you can go out and make the best decision possible. If you enjoyed this segment, make sure you hit that like button and definitely consider leaving us some comments. We always appreciate hearing from our fans. Also, make sure you're subscribed because we have tons of new content coming up right here on Dirt Tracks.